My husband admitted he cheated right before delivering his father's eulogy. I looked at him and said, "Funny timing. Because your son deserves to know who you really are before you pretend to be a saint." His hands shook as he stepped up. It had rained the night before. Not a soft, whispering drizzle, but a full-throated southern downpour that had turned the back garden into a mess of half-drowned leaves and slick mud. I remember standing in the kitchen that morning, coffee in hand, watching a squirrel try and fail to climb a wet tree trunk, its paws slipping every time it tried. It reminded me of something I couldn't quite put my finger on. That was the morning of Burton Hoyt's funeral. My father-in-law. A complicated man, in the way most men of his generation were. Kind, but rigid. Stoic, but somehow deeply opinionated. Always polite, always measured, except when he was drinking too much bourbon around the holidays. He'd once told me, during a Thanksgiving years ago, that the secret to a long marriage was not saying everything you think. At the time, I thought it was quaint advice. Now I realize it was a warning. Darian was already dressed when I came downstairs. He'd been up before dawn. That was typical when he was stressed. He'd get quiet, methodical, like a soldier getting ready for a mission. He sat at the edge of the bed earlier that morning, hunched, elbows on his knees, staring down at the carpet. I didn't speak. I just handed him a black pair of socks and turned on the lamp. We didn't talk much while getting ready. I'd worn a simple black dress, something I'd only worn once before, to a colleague's funeral years ago, and pulled my hair into a tight knot. Darian didn't comment. He was fidgety, kept straightening his tie, then undoing it, then tying it again. I think he went through that process 3, maybe 4 times. Max, our son, came down late. He'd grown a few inches in the last year, suddenly all limbs and angles, with the kind of acne that doesn't care how expensive the cleanser is. He was pale that morning. He looked tired. Burton and Max had been unusually close, in a way that sometimes made me feel like an intruder. They would go fishing together, even though neither of them really liked to fish. They just liked being around each other. It was a quiet bond. I think that's what Darian never quite understood. Love didn't always have to be earned with effort. Sometimes it was just presence. The ride to the church was silent. The sky was that soft gray that never fully commits to being stormy, just quietly dismal. The kind that makes everything look flatter, duller. Max had his earbuds in, head resting against the window. I didn't ask what he was listening to. We parked behind the church, near the back entrance where the funeral director had asked family to gather. The place smelled like old pine wood and damp upholstery. I remember thinking the sanctuary looked almost too pretty for a funeral, light spilled in through tall stained glass windows, casting little jewel-toned spots onto the backs of the pews. People milled around. Darian's sister Rue was greeting distant cousins, and their mother, Marlene, had already claimed the front pew. I didn't go up. I stayed with Max, a few rows from the back, waiting. And then, right before the service began, Darian leaned over. He didn't look at me at first. His eyes were fixed on the pulpit ahead, like if he stared hard enough, it might vanish and take the whole day with it. "Miranda," he whispered. His voice cracked, like his throat was dry. "I need to tell you something." I turned slowly. It was the kind of whisper that doesn't feel casual. It felt like a weight sliding into my lap. "Now." He nodded, still not looking at me. I can't explain what came over me. Something shifted inside me, an old fear, maybe. Something I had packed away neatly. I felt my stomach clench. He took a breath, deep and shaky, and said, "I've been seeing someone." Just like that. I stared at him. His face was blank, almost like a mask. I felt my body go still. I don't even think I blinked. "For the last year," he added. "It's over. But I had to tell you. The thing about heartbreak, real heartbreak, is that it doesn't arrive like a punch. It doesn't knock you down. It's slow, cold. It creeps in behind your ribs and settles there, like it has every right to be." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at him and said, very quietly, "Funny timing. Because your son deserves to know who you really are before you pretend to be a saint." He flinched. A tiny motion, like a muscle twitching involuntarily. And then the pastor said his name. "Now we'll hear from Burton's son, Dr. Darian Hoyt." He stood slowly. His hands were trembling as he adjusted his blazer. He walked stiffly down the aisle, the folded piece of paper he'd written the eulogy on clutched in one hand like it might disappear. Max leaned toward me. He'd taken his earbuds out. His voice was quiet, confused. "What's going on?" I didn't answer. I just sat still, hands in my lap, eyes on Darian. He spoke for 5 minutes. Maybe 6. His voice shook throughout. It didn't sound like grief, it sounded like someone barely holding themselves together. He spoke of childhood, of lake trips, of his dad's work ethic. of how Burton always said to take responsibility for your actions. The irony of that nearly made me laugh. But I didn't. I watched Darian fold up his paper, clear his throat, and walk back down the aisle like a man heading toward his sentence. He sat next to me, breathing hard, shoulders tense. "Please," he whispered. "Not now. We'll talk after." I didn't reply. But Max was watching both of us now, his expression dark and unreadable. We didn't go to the burial. On the drive home, Max asked again, "Mom, what's going on?" I pulled over in the parking lot of a diner. The kind of place with faded booths and a sign that probably hadn't been changed since the early 90s. I turned to him. I remember the way the sunlight hit his face, so young and already too familiar with disappointment. "Your dad cheated on me," I said. "For a year," he just told me. Right before the speech. He didn't react the way I expected. No shouting. No gasping. He just sat there for a second. Then nodded slowly. I figured. That surprised me. He told me that he'd seen a text once, 6 months ago. A woman named Talia. He hadn't told me because, what would he say? He thought it had stopped. He thought it was maybe nothing. He said he didn't want to be the reason everything fell apart. And that broke me more than Darian's confession had. My son had carried that knowledge for months, protecting the illusion I didn't even know we were still clinging to. That night, I didn't sleep. I laid in the guest bed at my sister Bree's house, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned slowly above me. The shadows it cast on the wall made it look like a spinning cross. A reminder, maybe. Or a warning. 3 days later, Darian came by. He stood on Bree's front porch, in his heavy wool coat, holding a grocery bag of my things. He looked like HLL, unshaven. Pale. He asked if we could talk. Outside, on the porch, we sat on the old wicker bench. It creaked beneath us, the sound cutting sharply through the stillness. "I didn't tell you because I was scared," he said. "I ended it months ago. It was stupid. It was selfish. I know that. I didn't know how to fix it, and then my dad died and I cut him off. How many others?" He blinked. "What? How many affairs, Darian? Was it just her?" He looked away. That pause, half a second too long, was all I needed. Everything I'd been trying not to believe hardened into certainty. I didn't say anything else. I stood up, walked inside, and closed the door. 3 weeks later, I filed for divorce. I didn't make a scene. There was no big shouting match, no thrown glasses, no crying on the floor. That's not how it happens for people like me. You don't grieve a betrayal like that all at once. You let it settle. You let it wrap itself around you slowly, like a vine, inching tighter every day. I filed the divorce paperwork on a quiet Wednesday morning, 2 weeks after Darian's visit to my sister's porch. It was raining again. The clerk at the courthouse was gentle, maybe a little too gentle. I must have looked like someone who needed pity. I was dressed in old jeans and a cardigan I hadn't worn since before Max was born. I felt invisible. Bree drove me there. She didn't ask questions. She just sat in the car, engine idling, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel like she was counting down the seconds until she could light a cigarette. She didn't smoke in the car anymore. Not since her daughter was born. But I knew she wanted to. I could feel it in the silence. Max hadn't spoken to his father since the funeral. He didn't answer texts. Didn't return calls. I didn't tell him not to, I didn't need to. Whatever thread was left between them had snapped the moment Darian stepped off that pulpit. I tried to keep things normal. I still went to work. Still made dinner, though more often than not it was just pasta and whatever we had in the fridge. I stopped organizing the pantry. I stopped folding the laundry with that pointless little military precision I used to care about. Some things just fell away. Darian didn't fight the divorce. Not really. He tried to delay it, filed for mediation once, called to ask if I'd reconsider counseling, but I think even he knew the gravity of what he'd done. Maybe if it had been just the affair. Maybe. But the way he told me, the timing of it, that was a different kind of cruelty. He'd waited until the moment he was about to be the center of attention. Right before he stood up in front of everyone to deliver a speech about honor and legacy and fatherhood. That wasn't guilt. That was a man trying to shed weight before lifting himself onto a pedestal. He wanted a clean conscience. He got silence. The first time I heard her name out loud was about a month later. It was a Thursday evening, and Max had stayed late at school for a group project. I was sitting at the kitchen table going through old insurance forms when Bree called. "She's pregnant," she said, without greeting. I frowned. "Who?" "Talia. The woman he cheated with. She's pregnant." She posted it. I didn't say anything. I could hear Bree lighting a cigarette through the phone. 6 months along, from the looks of it, she added. So either he was lying about when it ended, or she got knocked up during the grand finale. I stared at the tile on the floor. There was a crack near the sink where Max had dropped a mug last Christmas. I'd been meaning to replace that tile for months. Now I couldn't stop looking at it. I got off the phone without another word. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I opened my laptop and looked up her profile myself. Her name was Talia Morin. Blonde, artificially so. The kind of face that looked older in candids than in her profile pictures. Smug in that quiet, confident way. Smiling at the camera with one hand resting gently on a rounded belly. The caption read, "Our little miracle is coming this spring. Grateful for every heartbeat. Love you always, D." The D hit me like a slap. Not Darian. Not Dad. Just D. A nickname. Intimate. Familiar. They had inside jokes. They had pet names. They had a baby. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with an old Afghan around my shoulders, drinking cold tea, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator like it was a lullaby. And I thought about every year I'd given to that man. Every sacrifice. Every compromise. Every version of myself I'd let go of for the sake of partnership. It all felt like theft. The next morning, Max was quiet. He always noticed when something shifted in the air. He was like that as a child, so sensitive to tone and expression. He didn't ask what happened, but he watched me closely as I made breakfast, like he was trying to measure the damage. It wasn't until 3 days later that he said it. We were in the car, waiting for his school counselor meeting. He was drumming his fingers on the dashboard. "I saw it too," he said, without looking at me. I didn't pretend I didn't know what he meant. I knew, he continued. I knew he was lying about it being over. I turned toward him. "You don't have to carry that." He looked at me. His eyes were older than 16. "Neither do you." I didn't know how to respond. There's something jarring about watching your child become the one offering comfort. It felt like another betrayal, this one quieter, deeper. Like life had skipped a step. Later that week, Darian showed up unannounced. He looked different. Not just tired. Hollow. Thinner, like guilt had burned straight through him. He stood on my porch in a button-down shirt that didn't quite fit anymore, holding a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. No envelope. Just folded once, sloppily. He said he didn't want to talk. He just wanted me to read it. And then he walked back to his car. I read it that night. It was 6 pages long. Apologies. Excuses. Regrets. Repetition. He said he didn't know why he did it. That it wasn't about Talia. Not really. That it started during a conference in Raleigh. That it was emotional at first. That he hadn't planned for it to become what it did. He said he told me at the funeral because he couldn't lie to his father by pretending to be something he wasn't. I wanted to tear the pages in half. Instead, I burned them in a pie tin on the back patio. I didn't tell Max. Not because I was protecting Darian, but because I was protecting Max from more versions of a man he already didn't recognize. About a week later, I got a call from Rue, Darian's sister. She said she wanted to talk. Said it wasn't about Darian. Said she had something she thought I should know. We met at a bakery off Marymount Avenue. She looked tired too, like she hadn't been sleeping much either. She got straight to the point. Talia was his assistant, she said. At the clinic. He hired her last spring. Told me she was part-time. I blinked. She continued, Mom knew. She knew and didn't say anything. And just like that, the betrayal spread its roots even deeper. It took me 3 days to decide whether or not to confront Marlene, Darian's mother. I kept turning the information over in my head like a splinter under the skin. Not just that she'd known about the affair, but that she'd looked me in the eye during Burton's funeral, held my hand, whispered that family sticks together, while sitting on a secret that gutted mine. I wasn't close with Marlene, not in the way some women are with their mothers-in-law. She was never cruel, never outwardly dismissive, but she had a way of making you feel like a guest. Even after 15 years. Like you were always just outside the real circle. Always the woman who married her son, not the woman she called family. So when I pulled into her driveway that Saturday afternoon, I was ready. Her house was too neat. Too curated. The porch chairs were arranged at perfect angles, the flower beds freshly mulched. Everything looked like it had been carefully maintained to hide the rot underneath. She opened the door wearing pearls. Pearls. In her own home. As if grief had to be accessorized. Miranda, she said, eyes narrowing slightly. I wasn't expecting, I'm not here for pleasantries. That stopped her. She stepped aside, letting me in, and we sat in her sitting room with its untouched coffee table books and a grandfather clock that ticked like a warning. She offered tea. I declined. You knew, I said. She didn't even pretend not to understand. There was a long pause before she spoke. Yes. The silence that followed was sharp, brittle. I found out about 6 months ago, she said, folding her hands in her lap like she was delivering a eulogy herself. He came to me. Confessed. He said it was over, that he made a mistake. And you didn't think to tell me? You were about to bury his father, she said, her voice clipped. You think that would have helped anyone? What would you have done? Miranda started a shouting match in front of the church. I stood up. Not because I was leaving, but because I couldn't sit there 1 second longer. You could have warned me. Before I married him. Before I built a life with someone who lies as easily as he breathes. She didn't flinch. People make mistakes. Families survive worse. And that child, Talia's child, will be your son's sibling. Whether you like it or not. I laughed. A short, bitter sound. You think I'm going to teach Max to pretend this never happened? To welcome some stranger's baby into his life like this is just some extended version of modern family. You don't have to welcome it, she said, ice creeping into her voice. But don't poison him against his father. That's not your job. I stared at her. The way she sat so straight, so smug, like she was the one protecting something sacred. I realized then Marlene didn't want truth. She wanted preservation. The illusion of dignity. The appearance of family, even if the foundation was rotted through. I left without another word. That night, I told Max the truth. We were sitting on the deck behind Bree's house, bundled in old blankets with mugs of hot cider. The air smelled like rain and mulch and the last stretch of cold before spring would start showing itself. I told him about Marlene. About Talia working at the clinic. About the baby. He didn't interrupt. He just stared into the distance, jaw tight. I'm not surprised, he finally said. I looked at him. You're allowed to be angry. I'm not angry, he said. I'm done. It was such a clean statement. No drama. No tantrum. Just a door closing. The invitation came 2 weeks later. A card, mailed in an ivory envelope with gold script embossed on the front. Please join us for a celebration of new beginnings. Honoring Talia Morin and baby Hoyt, hosted by Marlene Hoyt. I read it twice before laughing. A baby shower. A celebration. Hosted by the same woman who told me to keep things civil for Max's sake. It felt like a slap disguised as a hug. Bree told me not to go. She said it was bait. Said they wanted to flaunt it. The new woman. The new baby. The new life rising from the ashes of mine. But I went. I went because sometimes the only way to burn something down is from the inside. It was held at a country club Marlene belonged to, some old money spot with white columns and waiters in pressed black vests. The room smelled like lilies and cucumber sandwiches. Talia was glowing, of course. In a lavender dress, hand resting on her stomach like a stage prop. Darian stood behind her, one hand lightly grazing her back, like they were playing house for a photo shoot. They didn't expect me. When I walked in, a hush moved across the room like wind through dry grass. I smiled politely. Said hello to no one. Talia blinked at me like she'd seen a ghost. Miranda, she said, voice light but tight. How thoughtful of you to come. I just looked at her, then looked at Darian. His face was a mess of emotions, regret, panic, maybe even shame, though I doubted he really knew what that felt like. I came for Max, I said. To see what he'll eventually grow up to understand. Marlene stepped in quickly, voice sharp behind the mask of manners. This isn't the place. No, I said, it never is it? Not the funeral. Not the front porch. Not the clinic. Never the place for the truth. Only for the photo ops. People were watching now. Someone dropped a fork. The clatter echoed like a firecracker. Talia looked like she wanted to say something, maybe an apology, maybe a threat, but I didn't give her the chance. I turned to Darian. Max won't be here today, I said. But one day, he'll remember this. The silence. The smiling. The pretending. And he'll decide for himself who his father really is. And then I left. A week passed before Darian reached out again. This time through email. One long, desperate paragraph, asking to talk, to explain. He said the baby was due in May. Said he didn't want Max to grow up hating him. I didn't respond. Instead, I booked Max and me a short trip. Just the two of us. A quiet coastal town where we could walk by the water and forget the wreckage we'd been living in. We didn't talk much during the drive down. We didn't need to. The wind said enough. So did the silence. The past was still chasing us. But for the first time in a long time, it wasn't sitting in the passenger seat. Spring bloomed slowly that year, like it didn't quite trust the ground it was growing from. Max and I came back from the coast with salt still in our hair and windburn on our cheeks. Something had softened between us. He laughed more. Ate full meals again. got into a college prep group, and even asked me to help with his essays, which nearly made me cry on the spot. He never mentioned his father. Not once. But the silence had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was distance. Chosen distance. The kind that comes with a boundary being fully set, no fanfare. Darian, on the other hand, was unraveling. He started showing up at Max's school. First for events, then just to catch him after class. Max didn't engage. Walked right past him once, straight into my car. Didn't even glance at him. Then he started emailing me again. Long, guilt-soaked monologues about how hard this has been and how we all make mistakes. One email ended with, "You don't have to forgive me now, but I hope one day we can be a family again." Family, like the word meant anything anymore. Then came the final straw. Max got a letter in the mail from Darian's lawyer. It was a formal request for visitation to re-establish a consistent paternal relationship, it said. I looked at Max as he read it. He set it down calmly and said, "So now he wants to play dad." That's when I decided. I wasn't going to fight him. Not with lawyers. Not in court. I was going to answer the way he understood best, by taking back what he valued most: reputation, control, and the illusion of being the decent one. I started with a letter. Not to him. To the clinic board. I was careful. Precise. Factual. I outlined the timeline of his relationship with Talia, when he hired her, when the affair began, based on her public pregnancy timeline, and how it violated both clinic ethics and HR policy. I included screen captures from her public social media posts, complete with his name tagged on her baby bump photos, the glowing captions, and his own comments confirming their relationship. I CC'd 2 other longtime clinic partners. I knew at least one of them had his own silent grievances with Darian's leadership. Bree's husband used to play golf with him. Then I sent an anonymous package to the local parenting newsletter Talia had just started writing for. It included an old conference group photo, labeled with names, and a copy of the clinic's employee handbook highlighting their anti-nepotism clause. And finally, I submitted a tip to the medical licensing board, not to strip his license, but to force a review of the ethics complaint. None of it was dramatic. None of it illegal. But all of it was damaging. The fallout came slow, like watching a tree lose its leaves one by one. First, Talia was removed from the clinic's public-facing marketing. Then Darian stepped down, temporarily, from his position as director, something about refocusing on family. Then the newsletter quietly archived all of Talia's articles and rebranded. And then came the part that tasted better than I thought it would. I got a call from Rue. "He's furious," she said. "Keeps saying someone's smearing his name. He thinks it's me or Mom. It's neither of you." She paused. "I didn't think it was," she said. "But I'm glad. Honestly, you let him off easy." Max never asked how it happened. But a few weeks later, he handed me a sealed envelope. It was addressed to Darian. "I'm not giving it to him," he said. "You can if you want. Or not." I read it. It was short. 3 lines. "I know who you are now. I'm not angry. I just don't want to be anything like you." I never sent it. Not because it wasn't powerful, but because I didn't want to give Darian even that much of my son's energy. In June, Max graduated. He wore a blue robe that was too long and gave a short, quietly confident speech at his school's academic banquet. Bree and her husband were there. My sister. Even Rue, who brought a gift card and an awkward hug. Darian was not invited. And even if he had shown up, Max wouldn't have looked at him. After the ceremony, we took pictures outside the school. Max smiled. A real one. The kind I hadn't seen in a year. As we walked to the car, he slipped his arm through mine. Still taller than me. "Still my baby. You did good," he said. I didn't cry then. Not until later. In the shower. Where no one could hear. One evening in July, I got a call from Marlene. I let it ring 4 times before answering. "I assume you've heard," she said flatly. "I hear a lot of things." She exhaled. "He's taking time off. They're separating for a while." She moved back to her sisters. I didn't respond. "I know you had a hand in it," she added. I stayed quiet. "Honestly?" Marlene said, her voice cracking just a little. "I thought you'd fall apart. But you didn't. You're colder than I gave you credit for." That made me smile. Not because she meant it as a compliment, but because she finally saw me clearly. "I'm not cold," I said. "I just stopped pretending. The house feels different now. Not quieter. Just settled." The pictures of Darian are gone. Replaced with ones of Max on the beach, holding a paperback in one hand and shielding the sun with the other. He looks older now. Not in a sad way, just like someone who knows more than he used to. I refinished the pantry shelves last weekend. Bought the exact tile to replace the cracked one in the kitchen. Not because I wanted perfection again, but because that tiny fracture had started to look like a wound. And I'm done living with open wounds. Some people say revenge is hollow, that it doesn't fix anything. But here's what they don't understand. It's not about pain. It's not about punishing someone into the ground. It's about reclaiming your story. And this ending? This new chapter? It's mine. Every inch of it.